Thank you, Tomi. I've totally forgotten that. He's been doing fantastically well. He had been a product manager at InterSwitch, and recently he's currently a product manager for a company called Topflight Apps in the US. And we are honored to have Tobi Esho in our midst to teach us and share with us from his wealth of knowledge and experience. Especially, we are going to be looking at things around software development methodologies and the software development lifecycle as how from a product manager's perspective. So, Tobi, feel free. Again, every single person here, we've all been looking forward to have you around. And so, yeah, please feel free to take the floor. So, again, before I continue, Tomi, you've not met Tomi. Tomi has been our chief facilitator, even though I'm not sure she can put on. Tomi, can you put on your video and just say hello? Tomi is also a product manager. She's worked across multiple industries and she's done some very fantastic things. Chief among those companies that at least I know of is Softcom, and she's done some amazing things there. So yeah, that is Tobi and introduction in a nutshell. So I'm going to give it over to Tobi. Please take it from here. Thank you.
All right, mic check. I hope everybody can hear me though. All right, hi guys. Good day, because I don't know where the different time zones. Thanks, Imole, for the opportunity to speak for as long as I hope I can about SDLC. I will share. Give me a second. I have the right to share. How do? Okay. All right, so I just need to note that I might not actually see questions or comments because I'm now in full screen, so please. I'm not sure how to moderate if there are questions in between, but I like for this to be as interactive as possible, especially because some parts, everybody will typically be very familiar with them, and then we get to some parts that gets a bit confusing. And I say confusing because even when I started, or when I transitioned into non-code tech, and then started to learn some of this, should I call them terms of this land? This some of this concepts basically. There were gray areas. There were areas that was sort of unclear. And then I think what makes it easier now is just the length of experience that I've had working with this methodology and then these principles over and over, and then it's made it easier. All right. So today we are addressing software development methodology, life cycle, the processes and the tools. And I'll just start with, the very simple one. It's when people, I mean, it's usually hilarious when you ask, it's as simple as asking a software developer what, to define what a browser is, right? Or what is software. It's the simple things that, bemuse you and then can get you confused. I'm not sure when was the last time anybody had to define what a software is, right? By default, it's software hardware, what you cannot see and what you can see, or what you can feel, right? That would be the most basic explanation that anybody could go with. But aside that, software is basically, all the different aspects of any application or a computer that you basically cannot touch, right? So whether it's the processor, whether it's an application, whether it's an algorithm, whatever it is, whether it's a line of code, anything that you basically cannot physically grab with your hand can be deemed as a software. It's speaking within the context of computers and then computer applications, right? And that then leads us to what a software development methodology is. I need to hide this. Okay. All right. So, what is software development methodology? Methodology is the approach or a way to do certain thing, right? How you execute on any action or any given action, right? And then, what it's now become a standard way of doing, that action. So software development methodology is, expressing or defining the concept of how to execute software development itself, right? So software development itself is, you know, um, actually building the software or actually, writing it, using the lingo of, what, software is. So software development methodology is, involves, the different processes and the different ways of developing the software. And oftentimes, this process, allows, something called the software development lifecycle, which I'm going to get to. Without this, or without, I struggle sometimes to actually think about how, softwares, some very famous ones, like the line of code that took people to the moon for the first time. What was the, approach for, coming up with the concept? This is what we want to build. This is what we want to build it, and how they managed it. And I would imagine that it would have been chaotic, right? Chaotic because, several years and, several decades after that, software development can still be chaotic if you don't manage it properly, right? You work into certain companies and then you can, especially when you start to build experience, right? Working within this concept of principles, you basically get into any organization or any software development team that is not working with any of the methodologies that have been laid out. And then you can easily see the chaos that exists within that team without question. So sometimes then, I sometimes just very curious about how exactly were people, doing certain things way before some of these concepts were structured. I would expect that maybe they had a process or a way to do them, but if they did not, it would have been I know I just would put it as it would have taken years and pain to actually get certain things done before these things became structured. So software development methodology is, like I said, the different processes for developing a software itself, right? The methodology that you go with is always based on your team and what you're trying to achieve as well. If you pay attention to some of the F500 or the top tech companies, Facebook, Google, they all have similar ways, within concept of how they build applications or how they build software, whatever it is they're doing. Everyone can adapt or has adapted this methodology, or any one of the methodologies I'm going to show to fit them, right? So that's adapting it is you take it and then you use it based on the the structure of your own organization or the kind of people that you have or the kind of things that you're building or what you want to achieve, how quickly you want to achieve them, or all of that. So whatever methodology you basically then choose will be based on what you think is best for your team, right? And I'll give some instances and different scenarios as we go on, so that paints a picture for the kind of organizations that we are familiar with, and then what some of them actually use or what they adopt the most, right? Okay, so software development methodology, embodies a life cycle, right? So software development itself has something called a life cycle. For the life of me, I do not know why the life cycle is separate. I studied English, so I see life cycle and I'm bothered because I think it should be together. But then again, this is how it's usually written. Sometimes it's life cycle, sometimes cycle, but oftentimes people address these things as SDLC. If you say SDL, nobody understands what you mean. If you say SDC, you probably think you're referring to the rap group, right? So it's usually SDLC, which then means that, like I said, life cycle is separate. So software development life cycle or systems development life cycle, follows this, or software development itself follows this, life cycle that is, no matter what it is you're trying to build, you would actually go through this process, right? In some instance, if you Google this, in some instance you see it as 5, in some instance you see it as 6. Some people actually even go as far as 10. But the average number can anybody help me choose a best computer? Actually, all right, thanks. All right, so so like I said, it could actually usually ranges between 5 and 7 on the average, and then some extremists take it all the way to 10. But I call them extremists because you're just doing the necessary. And what are these different stages, right? And what do they mean, right? It's like a child being born. Yeah, right. You want to give birth to a child. I am going to be politically correct, right? And say that, fine, you could adopt, right? And then you could also have, someone else bear the child for you, right? Which is also basically, and then they basically implant the egg into the person's, womb, and then all of that is done. But the traditional way, is, boy meets girl, they do whatever they have to do, and then something starts. But in the Christian way is that boy meets girl, or the religious way is boy meets girl, they get married, a bit of planning, family planning, as it's called these days, and then decide as well on how many kids they want to have, which is sort of like the end goal. In terms, speaking in terms of that, life cycle, and then the action happens. The woman takes in, sometimes, like I said, politically correct, the man takes in, and then the baby goes through the gestation period of 7 to 9 months or 10 in some instances, and then baby is born. Take the baby through life until they then become an adult. So you have different phases for that. So now bringing it down to software development is boy meets girl is, and then the family planning is what do we want to achieve, right? What is the outcome for this process? What are we trying to build? That, in fact, that is the word build there is the most critical word. What are we trying to build? And what do we need to build it, right? And then this is where you have your planning phase. In the case of boy meets girl, right? Certain things are very important. You need to have a roof over your head. You need to have money to be able to at least feed the child and yourself, right? I mean, those are the two critical things going by, man's critical needs. So you need to have a roof over your head. You need to be able to feed that child, and then clothe the child as well. And if you don't have all of these things, you need to then acquire them, right, before you start. Or you need to have a plan of acquiring them, as you go on, as you proceed. Otherwise, it'll just be a mess. So now you've probably not even had the activity, the baby making activity yet. We're just going through family planning, and you're picturing all of these things, and you're being realistic about how or what you need and when you need them and how you want to get them. So this is called requirement gathering, right? Planning, right? But requirement gathering. Requirement gathering is, if the man has to get a house, he needs to rent it early on. If he lives, with his parents, he gets married, he needs to move out, or the woman needs to move out and then get the house and then bring the man in, like I said, politically correct. So that's the requirement gathering part and then the planning part. And and these could be separated by requirement planning and requirement gathering. So you plan, you have planned all the things you need, and then you start to gather them, and that's it. Now, bringing it back to software development is, what are we trying to build? Like I said, but in most instances, and I would guess that a lot of people on this call are either aspiring product managers, or maybe some software engineers as well. But it will be in between product team. You would all fit within the product team, regardless of what your role or your title is, right? And you want to build something, whether you're building for yourself, whether you're building for somebody else, right? And I'll explain all of this, different roles later on. You need to engage who the product owner is. Who is your stakeholder, or who is assigning you or asking you to build this thing? What do they want to achieve? What do they want to build? How would they prefer that it's built? Where would they prefer it to be built? For who would they prefer it to be built, right? So working as a BA, it sort of comes back to a structure of the 5 W's and then the H, which is the where, the where, when, the what. I think it's the where, the when, the what, the whom, and then the how. I think I've missed one W. So you use that to sort of ask all your critical questions or your problem-solving questions of, your requirement gathering to yourself if you're the owner of the product, right? Or to the product owner, who is the person who is assigning you or employing you to actually build that software. Now you get out the requirements, it's clear. In some teams, as product manager, you would be the one who is doing this. And in some team, you would have a business analyst who is supporting this, or a product analyst, right? Or it could be a joint activity between both the product manager, the BA, or the analyst, whether it's a product analyst or a business analyst. It could be a joint effort, which is usually the best, right? So that, the BA doesn't go and take on the requirement that you as a product manager would need to give a feedback instantly about the feasibility of that requirement, or the timing of the requirement. And what I mean by timing is, if you've gone through some classes about, building a product and, building a product for your customer, right, or for the consumer, and then probably spoken a bit about empathy. If you've not, I'm hoping that sometime in this, through the journey of this, classes or all the classes, a bit of empathy would have been, addressed as a product person, right? So you, as a product manager, will be able to step in when the requirement is being gathered, and then use your empathy to understand and address to the assignee that, or assigner, that this is not feasible at this time and this is the reason why, right? So there's a bit of engagement that usually happens at the requirement gathering stage, a lot of it. And I see that as the pillar for any software, right? If it fails at that point, you're going to build the wrong thing. If you assume as a product team that you want to build a bridge, or you want to build, let me be dramatic. You want to build an electric car, right? The client says, I want to build an electric car. But what you heard is you want to build, an hydro-powered car, right? The process for building the two different cars are different. And if you hear the wrong thing and then take on the wrong thing, from the get-go, you're failed, right? Because all your planning, all your analysis, your design, implementation, testing is all going to fail, because the outcome is the wrong thing. And then, just dead on arrival for that software. I mean, a working software still, but not what the client asks for. So yes, a lot of engagement needs to happen between, like I said, product people now build products for themselves. So if it's yourself, you need to be thorough with that. But it's easier because it's yourself, so you can basically put down what you're thinking. But it's different when it is now somebody else, right, who is assigning you. And this person does not necessarily have to be one orga or anything. It can just be the CEO. You join a new company. You know, that's the company's objective. This is what they want to build. This is what they've agreed to build. Probably you're reporting to the product manager or SVP or a VP of product, or you're reporting to the CEO, or who is reporting to a board, or you're even reporting to the board directly. Somebody is, funding the development process, and then that person is the stakeholder, right? And you need to build according to what the stakeholder also wants. So that's it. I know I've got a bit on planning, but I feel like that's the foundation. And if you miss it at that point, it's it will from there. Now you move away from the planning and then you go to analysis, and that's now where taking all the things that you've basically gathered, all the information you've taken in, and then you sit down, whether with your team or with yourself, hopefully with yourself first, because I think as product managers or as product people, you need to come into any meeting with a lot of confidence, and then confidence also stems from the level of internalization that you've done for yourself, and the level of planning that you've also done, so that when you're communicating and when you're trying to steer the ship, right, you steer in the right direction. Otherwise, you don't want chaos, and chaos will always happen if you come prepared. Like, by default, any meeting, somebody invites you for a meeting, you're not prepared, it's chaos, except the art of BS, which it works for some people, but not everybody. So you're taking all of the information and then you look at it, sometimes on the whiteboard, sometimes you have, paper scrambled up and down, and then you try to then take in and internalize and understand what you need to build, the approach you set, and then how you plan to forge ahead, right? And that's it. So analysis is usually, it's good, you have it, but I see it as something that also cuts across the different stages of all the different cycles. So I would assume that you'd always do that continuously, right? Now design. I think the very first class that I joined was about design, and then that was good, right? Because every product needs to be designed, and then design is not always Figma, or design is not always Adobe SD, right? So I'm not going to go all the way back and start speaking about design, but I remember that class, and I hope if anybody wasn't, probably just get the recording as well. So design would mean that how exactly are we building this product, and how would it look like, and how would it work, right? So that's the user interface and the user experience. How would the consumer or the user interact with it, which is the UX, or how would the app interact with them, and what would they see, what would they see when they're interacting with the application. Not a lot of software have UIs, right? So you need to note that there are softwares that actually do not have any UI whatsoever, but there's a bit of UX in almost every software, because somebody or a user is engaging with that software. And a good example is, your Android or your iOS. It's there, it works. You get the new upgrade, you're downloading it, and then you're trying to get it on your phone, and then something changes. But what changes and the things you see are not really the UI for iOS, right? They're just iOS influencing some other application to work in a different way. So the UI is technically the UI for the application they are operating, right? But then iOS will then interact with you in some kind of manner as well, right? Because it changes even how some of the app behaves. So user experience is now changing, right? And it is the app that probably even influences your phone, how your menu comes up and all of that, right? And I think that's usually the simplest way to also explain that. So that is your design. And then you can take this into anything. I know Tesla is one of the most famous, cars today because of what they've done with electric vehicles. But Tesla has a software that powers the car itself. You don't have that in your, I don't know. I want to mention analog cars, some very old cars, probably non-electric cars, right? But you see the Tesla, you see the Mercedes Benz, you see some, even some, basic Toyota these days. Everyone is sort of adding a software to their cars as part of the design of the car, so that user experience is elevated, right? So you need to dwell on that a lot, right? It's right for the success and then the scalability of whatever products that you're building. So this is one area you want to sit at. And I would always, if you don't get it right at this point, you would actually miss it. I'll give you context about how this is critical. In Nigeria today, we have like a ton of neobanks or digital banks, right? If we call out the features for all of them, they all do the same thing, right? You deposit money, you transfer money out to a beneficiary, you pay for bills, and you probably get loans. Yeah, probably get loans. Not all of them offers that, but those are the most critical things. Bills covering, airtime, data, your DSTV and whatnot. And those like the basic things that any financial application should be able to do. However, we have probably, 200, 300 of them. Some of them are succeeding, some of them are not. But the ones that are succeeding, what makes them different and what makes them successful, even or despite the fact that they're actually doing the same thing that somebody else would have gotten from another bank or another new bank application, is the user experience, and that comes from design, right? So like I said, not like to try to go over everything about design, but this part, emphasis, because you need to get it right here as well. And then we move on to implementation. So now we have the design, you have all your requirements, you know what the application of the software is going to look like, how it's going to behave, and then you start to build, right? And that's what development or implementation is building. And there's really nothing to actually, there's not a lot to address there. So building is, what the team, the stack, might not be you, just as a PM person or as a product person, you give all of that to, a software engineer or engineering lead. They, figure out everything about, stack language, repositories, servers and all of that, right? They figure all of that out. Sometimes in between, sometimes before the project starts, sometimes in between, sometimes it's needed at the end, and that's where they do it. For example, is if implementation includes deployment, right? And deployment means you're going to get a software to the App Store, say iOS or Google, so that people can download it, right? That's not the first thing you want to start to do. You want to lead with at the implementation stage, because you don't even have an application. So maybe fine if it takes you a while to get your, credentials approved from Apple or Google. You want to start that early, but these are just credentials. They have nothing to do with deployment, right? So, but you would not be trying to figure out, pushing the code to store, right, or the software to, to the store to public when you have not even built it yet, right? So that cannot be part of your implementation approach. So implementation approach will be systematic based on how you also intend to either roll out the product, or if some things will take longer, you want to start early as well, so that you can able to catch up when you then need them. In one of the methodologies, I'll explain how this is actually very creative. So I'm not going to sit on at this stage. I'm not going to draw a lot on implementation for this chart, but later on I will. When I need to get conscious of time. Sorry, guys. And then the next stage is the testing and the integration. So if you build any application and you don't basically test them, you're going to fail. Higher chances you're going to fail. You're going to build the wrong. Someone that will have built the wrong thing. There's a lingo that a lot of companies use. I think software developers use. It's beans. In Yoruba language, uses ewa. Some people write it, say it in the beans English language, which is let me put it the right way. Software developers have the tendency to actually write a lot of beans, which is fancy word for rubbish, right? Or wrongful implementation, if I put it as politically correct way. But the person that's going to tell you that somebody has written rubbish is not the guy that wrote the rubbish himself or the cooked the beans himself. It is someone else that is independent and has no allegiance to allow the beans fly. His work is to catch it on so that the customer is not the one who is catching it and then putting a bad rating on your application or deleting the app from the first day they download it, right? And that's where you want to do your testing and ensure that what you've built is working how it is meant to, without any bug, which is wrongful introduction of something or a different like of the application or the software working in the way that it's not meant to work, or working the way it's meant to work with a different approach, which is what we used to do in secondary school, which is the final answer because you can see it in the as part of the options you have, but you don't know how to get there, and you just maneuver your way to get to that answer. That maneuvering does not always have to, it doesn't work all the time in software development because the approach is also very important to a working solution. So you want to have testers. The job role or the generic title for this or the people that will do this are testers, and testers could be yourself as a product person. It could be your team members. It could be the software developers, but not the person who wrote the code. So you have a team of 3 people, and two other people can test whatever the one person that did, right? So that's a testing approach for a lean team. Or you could have a dedicated quality assurance analyst that actually his work is just test. And they test different things. They test UI and UX, and they also test the code itself. And ensure that it meets the acceptance criteria for that software, or it meets the requirements. In the case of if it's a project, it meets the requirements for the software, which is what the client wanted and what we all agreed that we're going to be building. Now you do the testing, a bit of integration for any third party, a bit of integration for any third party, and then you deploy, right? Now, deploying is then, shipping the product or shipping the software out to whoever it is that is the intended user. And for every software, again, one of the things that I have not been able to solve, and I don't think anybody has, is the origin of bugs on a working application. I've tried to read about it, but I don't understand it yet, right? Something works, it's fine. We've tested it. The code lines are clean, documentations are fine. Everything is working okay. Probably working okay 5 minutes, ago, and then something just happens, right? Usually it could be influx of users, but sometimes not even that because you have applications that nobody is using, it was working fine, and then 5 minutes afterwards, something just happens. And then you hear a lot of this from developers and how they go nuts about that. And then for PMs, would always happen that the application would work when you're testing with your people, it's fine. They have a public demo, and then there's a bug. Bugs are creative beings. They know when you need the software, and then they only come at that point to mess up your plan as a PM. So be extra careful and test. You can never over test any application, especially when you have a demo representation, right? But then how do you manage this? Because you can't always, be actively testing every single day. You set up maintenance for that software, which is one, to maintain what you built and keep its current standard, or to improve the standard as well. So maintenance is not just, maintaining what it is, but you could also maintain upward, not just parallel, and then continuously improve on that application as well. Now there's a last part. It's a bit of it's not related to software development lifecycle. It's actually product development lifecycle, but there's also the part where you stop maintaining a product and you actually kill the product or kill the software, which is taking the software and then making it die or go to sleep. But we're not going to speak about that. That's more related to product development lifecycle. Now I have spoken a lot about software development lifecycle. And basically the disadvantages of this, it's straightforward, and I've mention a lot of them in between that explanation, but business requirements are gathered from the beginning. It makes it very clear what we want to do. Processes are finance. You have a start and the end period, right? Because we know this is where we're starting, this is what we want to achieve, this is how long we think it's going to take us, all of that. And it starts to, move towards a goal, right? So it's not about the time, but just that this is where we're starting from, and then this is the goal. And then you walk your way to get to that point. That sense of direction really helps. Project tracking and control mechanisms, right? Because of the different stages, you're able to manage things, in phases before you move on to the next one. Project progress, you can share with your stakeholders. This is where we are now. We're in planning, we're in development, we're testing. Everybody's excited when you say that we're now testing. Nobody's excited when you say you're development, except it's taking too long to even get to development. Testing is a good space. Deployment or pushing to store, that is exclusive for any stakeholder, and then easy to also detect errors, right? Now, SDLC itself has 2 frameworks, but it has a lot more. Actually, it has too many. Probably between 7 and 9. I'm not sure now, right? Hold on, sorry. But there are 2 common ones, and I promise you, regardless of where you work, well, I don't know, some people might be in some sectors that I'm not familiar with, but if it's manufacturing, software development company, production plant, oil and gas even maybe, I bet you that this would be the 2 framework that you would actually use, and probably never ever interact with the other ones, right? So we have the waterfall model and we have the agile development software. Sorry, that was a repetition. So agile software development, sorry. And then I'll just address the first one and then move on to the agile. So this one, very interesting, how when Imole was doing the introduction, I work for a company that all my life, Agile has been the very common one. I know about waterfall. I have never had to sit within. No, okay. So I worked as a BA. Part of my experience was me working on projects that had definite requirements, exhaustive requirements, which is nothing else was going to add or change or remove. Maybe remove, but nothing was adding, nothing was changing. This is definitely what we're doing. So we crack it at the requirement stage. Everything is there for the design, and then a bit of design you would have. We do what's called a working prototype, so everybody can also visually see what we want to do, and then we start to build, and that's it. Once you build, it matches the prototype, you hand over to the client, right? So those were project-based organizations that. Well, that was a project-based organization, and that was the approach that we worked with, and that was waterfall. We used to lie to ourselves that was agile because we were doing sprints. Well, truly the sprints, we're doing stand-ups, and I'll explain what that is. But God knows, we're just for accountability's sake, not because we're doing Scrum or anything, but we were strictly operating within waterfall, and then adopting some of the ceremonies for Scrum. But I'll get to that. So waterfall. Then I haven't, after that period, not interacted with it for a very long time until very recently this year. And then I'm back to waterfall approach. And I promise you, like, the difference is actually very visible. You can actually feel it. How you basically will move from one phase to the other, to the other, to the other. You miss out on something, you have to go back to the beginning. And that is what waterfall is, in the real sense of what the word or how it sounds, which is you have all the different stages that we've addressed in the last 20 minutes, right? But you need to finish one stage before you move on to the next one. You need to finish that stage before you move on to the next one. And that's sort of similar to what I had explained previously through the circle, because I even took this explanation myself through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? And that is exactly what waterfall sort of embodies, which is you go through analysis, right? You go to requirement specification, you design, you develop, you test, integrate, and then deployment and then maintenance as well. Again, like I said, I did intentionally put this chart differently from the other one because you would see that the words look similar, but the process is the same. Sorry, the words look different, but the process is the same, which is, this one had, implementation. That one had implementation for development. This one had implementation for the deployment, right? But in the real sense of the phrase, you know where you are, which is post-testing. You're about to get the application to public or the software to public. So waterfall is you gather your analysis, you do your analysis, or you gather your requirements. You will not start anything related to design until you are fully sure that you have everything you need, right? And you go to design. Once you're in design phase, you need to design everything you want to do and then go to development. Now, it's hard to explain this. It's going to be tricky to explain this without jumping too much into the other one, which is Agile, which is if you are in design or you're in development and your engineering lead finds out that this is not possible, this particular requirement is not feasible because of X, Y, Z. Maybe technology stack has changed or whatever it is, right? You cannot just go to requirement specification or design and fix it so that, or let's put design the stage before and fix it. So that now that the UI UX person or people have changed the design with the new concepts, you can just proceed again to development. No. Or in waterfall model, you actually have to go to analysis, take that feedback, go to analysis, and start again. And like it's really annoying. And I'll give you context. You want to build, say software, you want to build a software for any client, whether it's a government client, right? Usually government client or anybody that they know what they want to build. It's not a product, it's an internal application. So there wouldn't be any upgrades or anything in very long time. Probably we're ready to retire the application if there would ever be any change in the future. So the application is exhaustive, nothing is changing. If you get the development and then you find out something, whatever it is that is that client that actually assigned you, or whether it is a stakeholder that assigned you to do that thing, that was part of your requirement gathering stage. You will take the feedback from whoever it is that gave that feedback, or whatever the reason, might not just be someone's feedback, whatever the reason why the process is broken, that process is broken, or that phase cannot move beyond where it is. You will take that feedback, go all the way back to the client, right? Address it, write a new requirement for it, analyze it, take it through design. Design needs to work on the new feedback, bring it back to development. Nothing else is happening until you go through this step again. So you go past development and then you go to testing, and then if you have an issue again and the tester finds something and then calls something out, or you're trying to integrate, probably trying to integrate with, say, you build a payment application or a merchant application, and you want to integrate payment with like Paystack, right? Or you're about to deploy it to store. I'll use that as well. Let me use the last page. You're about to deploy it to iOS, and iOS calls, and they will always do this. Apple will always say, oh, something is up with your software or your application that would not allow us to update it. Maybe it's a security issue or concern. The very common thing will have just been developers, oh guys, let's fix this thing that Apple has said, and then test it and then move it quickly. No, in waterfall, you actually have to go back to requirement specification, taking that feedback, do the design. I mean, you might breeze through it quicker than you did the first time because now you're iterative, but you would need to go through those stages again. And I'll call out instances where those things happen. If you work in a power plant, or a car plant, right? Or any plant, any manufacturing plant, and you have that conveyor belt of all the products going to different phases or different stages, right? And the one has a defect. If you understand how production or manufacturing works, right? They don't sort the defect until it actually gets to the actual end product. They don't try to find the defect when it is on the belt or when it's still on the conveyor belt and then try to move it. So maybe something was supposed to print expiry date, and then for some weird reason, expiry date did not print. There's no machine that's trying to spot the one that doesn't have expiry date so that to take it back to the expiry date machine or printer so I can print on it and then come back. No. The entire conveyor plant or the manufacturing plant is built in a waterfall model that it needs to go from the container to the content to the print or the wrap to the expiry date and then blah blah blah. So when it gets to quality control, right, and they spot the defect, they would need to take out the content. They cannot just put. They cannot put. I mean, the machine is not designed to start in the middle, where they just say these are all the ones without expiry date. I put it here. Print expiry date. Move on. No, they would need to remove or whatever the content is, and then take that content. Let's say it's Pepsi content. Put it back in whatever. Probably either throw it to waste or whatever it is. But the idea of the concept would they need to take it back through the entire machine again. I mean, it might not be the perfect example, but they need to take it back all the way again. The same thing with the car manufacturer, and the same thing, right? If something has a defect, and the car has a defect, right? You can't just say, "Oh, this is the defect," start it from here, because the entire machines are already programmed to work in a waterfall model. So you need to take that thing or the raw material for that thing through that process, except something you can then fix manually, which is, like I said, probably not the best example, but that is just that conveyor belt is the process that I'm trying to show. It needs to go from one to one to one. If something fails, it can't just start in the middle. It has to go all the way back again. Now, you would say that sounds very rigid, right? And I agree, but it works for some people. So what are the advantages, right? So the advantage is that it's simple and easy to use. And you'll see this and you'll be like, that doesn't match the explanation you just gave, being a simple or easy to understand process, right? But it is if you understand all the other ones. Or when you understand the other ones, you find out that this is probably the easiest, because when you're being asked during any production life cycle for anything, or even software development life cycle, and you're being asked, this product, where are we for this product? So everybody needs to understand with a sense of belonging or oneness that this software is at this stage at this time. And what are the stages? Those are the things that you already seen, right? So if we're here, all of us know that we're here. If we're here, we all know that we're here. If we're here, so it's clear, right? There's no confusion. Nobody's assuming something else, right? Because it's a journey, a collective journey. It is also easy to manage due to the rigidity of the model. Quite an irony there. But the reason why it's easy to manage is, like I said, if you understand the other ones, or when you understand the other ones, you'll see how this is also easy to understand, or this point makes more sense. Every stage has an intended output or a specific output. So we know what we need to do before we move to the next one. And once we achieve that, or we hit the spot, we move on, right? So that way, if you take a look at a project that has clear timelines, clear deliverables through all the different phases, it's easier to just navigate through it and then move through it. And then you hit all your checklists and then you move on to the next thing. You hit your checklist, move on to the next thing. And that's what that point is saying, right? That it's just easier to manage because we know what every stage is, what is expected for every stage. And it's also easy to check to see if does this thing match all the things that it should be matching, before we then move on to the next stage, right? That way, it's easier for any project manager or product manager to just, check, move on. So the phases also do not overlap, which is one thing at a time, and that's also an advantage. When again and again and again, when you understand what is on the other side of waterfall, which is agile. Um, um, so yeah, so that just the fact that there's no overlap also is an advantage. And like I said, it's all dependent on the organization and what works best. It wouldn't work best for every organization, but for some project style organization, it's clear, it's good. For some manufacturing organization, it's clear, it's good. Even for some software, fully software, companies like Facebook or the likes, it could also work for some type of projects, right? Now the limitations are, the very annoying one of you always have to go back. That's by default the most annoying part is you can't just fix something on the spot and then have it go. You have to take it all the way back and then start again. Also, until you actually finish the entire journey, you actually don't have anything tangible to deliver to deploy, right? So you need to go through all the different stages. If it takes a year, estimatedly, to run through the entire 5, 6, 7 software development stages before you can actually have a working product, that means you will actually be building or be going through software development for a whole year before you have anything tangible to actually, say that this is the product that we've built and this is the outcome. Now, that comes with a risk because if the project is say a year and then testing is in the last quarter of the year, and then something is spotted in testing or in development, or maybe at deployment stage where you're trying to push to Apple, and Apple says this cannot work because of XYZ, right? And now you have to take the application back all the way to the requirement guidance stage and all the way back, right? The reason why you only got to Apple and then you figured that out, or maybe even in testing or development, is that nobody was trying to check. Everybody was focused on the stage that we're at that time. Now I've spent 6 months or 7 months before we get to development or before we get to testing. And now the testers are now finding something that now requires us to go back to requirement gathering, which we did months ago. Some people can't even remember all the things that were spoken about, right? And they have to go all the way back there before you can move on to the next and the next and the next thing. That is annoying, right? And that is risk because it could also be expensive for that development team because of the number of hours and all of that. So you can see by yourself, you can start to picture some of the kind of limitation that will come from running through this process. But like, again, it has good, it has its negative. I didn't call them disadvantages. I sort of put in there that they are limitations. They are not unusable just as a result. They're just limitations, right? Now, when do you use this? And I try to quote some of them. When a system requirement is very clear, it's exhaustive, you can use waterfall, right? When the system is well defined and the technology is understood as well, you can use this. When all the requirements are consistent without ambiguity, which is everybody understands it, client is not asking for something that you don't understand, or even if you do not understand, you've gotten clarity into what it is, and then everybody's fine. And everybody being everybody through the value chain, the PM, the product team, the development team as well. Everybody's clear. You can then use waterfall, right? And like I said, it's very random. A basic example is the production of Coke. What else can possibly? In fact, I think it's part of the marketing drive for this kind of product is that our product tastes the same and then the taste is consistent, right? So nothing is changing. Customers are expecting to get the exact same taste of Coke for the next 10, 20 years, right? It's like you fly to different countries and you start to have different variants of Coke, but yes, it needs to taste the same. If it tastes like Pepsi, then there's a problem. If your Coke tastes like Pepsi, is a problem, even though they're both cola drinks. So in cases where requirements, like I said, are consistent, you can then use waterfall to actually do that. Planning and estimation is a management activity. Now, this one means that the product team is not the one that is setting the requirements. The product team is not the one that is setting the expectation or the deployment or what to build and all of that. So by default, they're not the product team is not the one that's also going to set how long it's going to take us to build, right? Because it is clear what you need to build. You can actually get the product manager that maybe a project team, an outsourced project team, it could be a consultant that has worked on that project over and over. Now that person will come and say, based on historical data, this is how long it takes to build a software like this, right? Historical data. They look at the requirements and they understand it, and they see that there's nothing that is different from what they've done over and over, and then somebody estimates it. And that is something that, like I said, I'm now back into. Someone who's coming from Agile, where things are a bit more fluid, to a process where the timelines are definite. You need to work within the timeline. And who is setting the timelines? Management. Resources are adequate, experts is also available and easy. All of that is pretty much straightforward. The project is short and fixed. So short means, I gave the example previously about the 1 year period for a development, and then you find something out in the last quarter. 1 year is probably forgivable. Imagine how long it took. There's a documentary now on Netflix about the process of, or how they built SpaceX, and the failures and the issues and the challenges and the success that they had in the development of the building of SpaceX. That's the Elon Musk space company. And it took a long time, right? But they did not work within the waterfall model. They actually worked within, they had a bit of Agile, because they had incremental releases that they would test, and then it will fail, and then they will go back and then start again. But if they had fully done waterfall, and then that project took about 3 years, give or take, before the very first successful product, it means that somebody will have been catching on to errors from testing stage, maybe 2 years down the line, right? And that becomes very expensive and unreasonable. But if they've already scoped this project to take about 3 months, 3 years, the best thing to do would be to run through short iterations and then figure out if you're going to be able to achieve this thing by creating like mini products. I'll get to this, much later, but mini version of that thing. It's not the full thing, but just a small working application or a small working software to see if it will work. And what makes it small? Small is by the requirement is small and the timeline is small, right? It's very little. So this way, waterfall will work for short projects that are fixed, unlike longer projects that waterfall would not be the best option, because you don't want to find issues, deep down the line, and then you're just wasting resource time as well. Now the next one is Agile. I'm not sure if there are any questions about waterfall. If there are, I think you can see the chat now. So anybody could just drop the questions, and then I'll see if I could pick them up from there. Anyhow, I need to close this. Okay. All right, so Agile model, very common if you have, done anything related to software development. This is the most common software methodology, right? And Agile approach to software development just allows you to revisit the different phases. Again, coming back to this diagram here, you would see that it's still the same as the software development lifecycle, right? This is just a methodology for how you handle that process. And that is, you have your planning, you have your design, development, testing, deployment, review, and then you can, exit that. into launch, this ribbon goes under it. So it's not like it's coming back to plan, but you can plan, right? Or you can design, but the ribbon goes to launch. All right, so Agile approach to software development just allows you to revisit different phases of development. The approach is called incremental or iterative development, and that's going to be a lingo that you're going to hear a lot. Iterative, which is short increments or short releases, or periodic releases as well. Agile model allows you to change scope changes according to the new requirements change for any software. And it's very simple. For everything else that I have said about waterfall and then how you always need to go back, right? Agile is the opposite of it, which is you don't need to go back if you get a new requirement. You don't need to go back all the way back if you discover something new, or if customers have decided the customers not want something else. So something else means that, oh, you want to build something, you've spent a couple of months building, somebody else launched it before you, that software, and then you start to you pay attention to the market and you see that, oh, all the comments on Twitter is about, oh, why don't you build this? Why don't you build that? Why don't you do this? This is what I like. Now, maybe you missed that doing your own user research, all right? But now that you have actual feedback from a product that is similar, you don't want to say you're stubborn and just continuously build what you are building without consideration. So consideration does not mean that you have to stop and then just take on the new feedback that you've gotten from the market. Consideration is, this is what the customer is saying, the market is saying. What actions are we going to take to react, right? So an action is also no action, right? Which is, we're not going to do anything, right? Our decision is to go as we have intended, release to the market. We already know what the feedback are, and then we just quickly build that thing once we've pushed out to the market. That's one decision. Another decision could be that now that we understand what these things or what the customer wants, right? Let's change our direction. Take a look at what we do, change our direction, and then build according to what the customer is saying. So it could be either one of them. So Agile basically just allows you to take in feedback midway at any point or any stage, and without having you to go all the way back to the previous stage or the stage before that to move on or to proceed, right? Now, what are the key principles for Agile? There's a lot of them, a lot. And then in some certifications and some other trainings, you probably get in-depth about these things. But I picked the ones that I felt like, no matter what team you are and where you're starting and when, this would be like the foundation for you to be able to execute and flow properly within the Agile framework. The first one is that requirements are accommodated even at later stages of software development. Key principle, you need to note that. And that influences your reaction to, one, like I said, the market. Two, it influences your reaction to when your stakeholder comes and says, I don't want to build this anymore. This is what I want to build. Or you're building something, you have a marketing team, or you have a business team, and the business team comes and says, I know this is what we're doing, but this is what the user or the customer is saying, right? This is what they want, and this is how they want it. Agile allows you to accommodate that feedback, right? Without having to go all the way back or lose all the work you've done. Involve customer throughout the entire journey. Now, if you've heard some of the examples I keep giving, you would see that I keep making a lot of reference to the customer, to the user, and also to the stakeholder. And you want to get them involved through the requirement gathering, which is your user test, your market analysis, collecting feedback. I know it's a very common expression at product interviews. Like, oh, tell me your product development, methodology, or and then everybody's narrating how they engage the customers to understand the customers' wants. Is a lie. it's not all the products that you have used that you have enjoyed, that they did some level of market finding or some questionnaire before they actually built it. Some people just had some product sense, saw the product, saw the problem, no question about if the problem existed or whatsoever. Had a lot of empathy about how they think the problem was going to be best solved, and they just went ahead to developing it, and then it was either a smash or a hit, or a smash or a pass. Sorry. So, but for Agile, right, by default, you should actually have your customers through all the different stages of your development, and also in your increments of your software as well. Now, you want to be able to deploy software solutions within months and short periods, unlike waiting a whole year or waiting 3 years, depending on the kind of product you want to build. You want to build and release quickly and then fix things quickly. Another easy example is your iOS. Today, I know there's iOS 10.15, but usually it starts from like a 10.1 or 10.2. And the 10.2 is the public release, right? I think it would always start from a 10. But Apple has better programs for developers and then non-developers. And I guess the first one they will do is the one for developers. And they label it that way. The one for developers, so they can spot issues, people can help them to try to hack the application, all of that. They fix all the reports that they get and the feedback that they get. Do it on the second one, do a better release, some public, for the people that signed up to the beta program, get the feedback, and then, then feel confident about releasing a public version. The public version is now maybe like a 10.3. So you're launching an application for the first time, you're using it for the first time, it's already a 10.3. Who use 1 and 2? Somebody else, not you. And now we are on a 10.15, right? So it's going through a lot of journey. I'm not saying that's the actual 1 to 3, but I'm just saying, and they have 15 versions. I'm just saying that the labeling also tells you how they were also releasing things in increments, rather than keep the software with them until they were very confident that this thing is exactly where we want it to be. Excuse me. And that's another thing about Agile. You actually would not always know or have all the full picture before you start. Or like waterfall, it is not essential for you to have the full picture before you start, right? And then last one is that Agile teams can adjust their increments to scope with present circumstances. That's sort of self-explanatory. Now, the next one are the advantages and disadvantages, right? For Agile. Without having to even look at this, you can already tell, because of where we're coming from on a waterfall, you can already tell the advantages, right? The first one is that you can adapt to change very quickly. So you can accommodate change, and that's using the very traditional lingo that change is constant. Agile methodology also gives room for guesswork. Guesswork being that, like I said, you don't have to have all the full picture, but you can make a lot of assumptions. And even in your product documentations, there are things that you can actually quote as assumptions. We want to build a merchant software, right? A merchant website. An assumption is that Paystack can collect payments on your behalf, and Paystack can collect payments through different channels. And then users can put in their card on Paystack and then get debited, right? That's an assumption that could be a guess. It's not more of a guess because it's factual, but you already have an assumption. And you're not going to build a payment gateway for yourself because you plan to use Paystack. You finish the first version of the application in 2 months or 3 months, and then they tell you Paystack has packed up. There's no alternative, right? Let's say it was just Paystack. And let's say it was the year 2000 and it was just, InterSwitch WebPay or whatever. Either you retire the application, or you now build your own payment gateway, which we already know is a lot of work to do, right? And they have to now start doing documentation for it. But when you started, you basically, made an assumption. You did not do any documentation for payment integration or payment gateway, because why? Agile allowed you to be able to do that. And then Agile has already accommodated that if sometime in the future you get stuck, if you figure out that Paystack is not working or Paystack has now changed how they want to collect payment, you can easily adapt because you're working with Agile. So it's some level of confidence to be able to get you to start early, have minimal documentation, and then fix issues or address issues or things, not issues, as they come or as they arise. Customer satisfaction is ensured. The reason why customer satisfaction is ensured, unlike waterfall, is if you go through a successful waterfall, like I said, with the power plant thing, and then they actually check for expiry date at the end during quality control, the thing has actually gone through the entire belt before it gets there, right? And that customer or that person is not satisfied because the product does not have expiry date. So somebody then needs to, write it as not satisfied or doesn't pass QC. So when it's going to put it back in the, as part of the raw material, or put it somewhere that they can run it through the belt again and all of that, right? But if they were going with Agile and not the conveyor belt style, it means that there's a check, somebody is checking, the consumer is present or the QC person is present at the different stages. And then the stages are not too robust or too rigid because we can move on from the stage very quickly and move on to the next one. And then if we figure out we're stuck or we have a roadblock, we can just come back to the next stage to fix the roadblocks that we are fine and we can move on again, right? And that way you can walk your customer through all the different stages and then they can give their feedback in real time about the different stages. Customer can be giving you feedback when they are demoing the app, doing tests. Customer can give you feedback on the first day you push to store. Customer being your stakeholder as well. And because of Agile, fine, this is the feedback, quickly do it. Build an APK or test flights build again, and then push that new version to store, and then you solve the problem, right? Why? Because you run through Agile, and then you're able to solve problems very easily and quickly. Limitation. Agile would actually not. It would be difficult for Agile to work in the project style where, like I said, everything is well defined. We're just wasting our time by doing some of the activities that Agile might require, and you can scale it as well for large, processes or large processes or development process where all the requirements is necessary to have all the requirements or all the understanding before you start. E.g., back to my conveyor example, somebody had designed the different stages for the conveyor, right? Or for that, manufacturing, line. And you cannot use Agile in that sense where you say, let's wing it, or let's do guesswork. Is when this thing is at this stage, this is the point where it's going to do expiry date. No. You're wasting too much time there. When we get there, we'll fix it, right? You can use that in a small project where if you are stuck, it's very easy to just, maneuver things, change things, update things, and move on. But in a place where systems and, structure is required, right? And documentation for all of those things are required. You cannot use Agile, right? You need to use, something else. Now, design is not much of an emphasis because, again, the first goal is let's even see if this thing will work. One, let's see if people will like it. Two, let us see if we're going to make money out of it. Let us see if it is stable. There's a lot of let us see, let us try, where you then start to de-emphasize design, which is trying to perfect it. You do design, but not putting too much emphasis on it to perfect it before you move on. Now, I will be honest to say that this might still be relevant, but not a lot more these days. So what I mean is, if you, depending on the products that you're working on and then the sector, if you're working on a new bank today, like I said, user experience is what changes. If you don't place emphasis on design, you're going to be the bottom, 100, right? If you don't pay a lot of emphasis on design, because you're not offering a new value proposition, you're just changing the user experience, and you don't focus on design, you're failed. So you need to, you do not necessarily require a lot of emphasis on design for Agile, because you can amend design on the way, update things on the fly. In fact, through your different stages of development, for every iteration you have, you can continuously add design improvement as part of it as well. So, so that you don't dwell on over planning design as well, right? Now, the project can easily be distracted when the customer is not clear on the outcome. So if you're building something where the customer does not know what exactly they want exhaustively, right? Like I said, the word exhaustive, it means that they will keep coming back and they will keep thinking, oh, add this, oh, add that, oh, add this. Now, if you accommodate all the requests from the customer, you would be in an endless loop of development, because you never actually ship a working application. So sometimes the flaws that you actually ship in a product is also very valuable, right? But if you try to take in the customer feedback every single point to make the application flawless, you will never launch the application, right? And you get, because you just keep getting distracted by the customer's feedback, right? Testing and test construction is difficult and needs specialized skills. Just because of the process of you do something doesn't work, somebody says, do it this way, or do it this way, or customer says, comes and says, do this, do this, do this, do that. You don't want to wait until all the feedback or everything has been done and you not test, right? That's not what Agile is. So your testers as well needs to be able to have like a full picture of, this is what we're testing, this is what we're testing, and this is how this is going to work at this stage. So there's a bit of a specialized skill that is required for testing, especially in an Agile environment where you're either testing for the UI, you're testing for the API, and you are testing what is meant to work now. You know which of the part of the application of the software is a technical deficit, and then you know the ones that are going to work on in the future. So there's a bit of, you're not just, you need to have context, and then you need to also build test cases or follow according to the user stories to be able to test. So, but this one, like I said, this is a lot more relevant to quality assurance analysts, people who are actually dedicated to testing. They already have and know all the things they need to do to be able to maneuver through a fast changing environment, development environment. Now, when do you use Agile? I have given some of the, or cited some of the examples. First one is that the plans are dynamic and keep changing. When you have a customer or a client, a stakeholder that you already sense that they will keep asking for more things, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a product for a general market. It could be something specific to a particular organization. It could be an internal product as well, right? Where it's also exhaustive. In this case, where you know that things are going to continuously change, and you don't want to keep going back all the way to the waterfall approach, you want to use Agile. Also, you want to use Agile when you know that customers can provide feedback easily due to short iterations, right? But this is more of an advantage because customers can provide feedback because of your short releases. You have a working application, or a working prototype, and they keep building upon that, on top of that, on top of that, until you have like the full intended product, right? And even at that, there will always be room for improvement. You want to use Agile in the case where the team is responsible for estimation, and not, like I said, the stakeholder is the one setting the. In the case of waterfall, where the stakeholder or the CEO or the organization is one that is saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing now, all that. It is an Agile environment, right? You are the one as the team, the product team, that basically sets when you want to do something or when how long it's going to take you, right? And there's a process for that. I wouldn't get into that. Also, in the case where documentation is not of high priority, it's very easy to just use Agile in that case. Processes are important, but the project can be slowed down during over specification. So there is such a thing as over specification, and it just spends too much time on requirement gathering, and you never probably move past it. In fact, it will be death by information in some cases, right? When Agile already encourages you to just get the very minimal basic things you think should be in the software, start developing, and then push. If you are still developing and you have new requirements, you can add it because it's Agile, and then you just update it. And the reason why you can do this is because you are working within short circles. And I'll explain that short circles a bit in the next in one of the slides about the short circles. Now, there are 5 types of Agile methodology, and then the 2 common ones are Kanban and Scrum. All the other ones are used by extremists or in extreme cases, either one or both at the same time. But the Scrum and Kanban are the most popular ones. And you will just see why they are the popular ones. Now, what is Kanban? There are common ideologies that humans are visual people. We are moved by what we see, what we can touch, and what we hear as well, right? So except somebody is reading out to you certain words, we are moved a lot by what we see, and then I think Kanban sort of addresses that as a way of motivating a team through software development. So Kanban is all about visualizing your work, limiting your work in progress, and then maximizing efficiency. We can actually run an Agile team without any form of documentation, without a lot of documentation, and just a high level understanding of where we are for that software, right? But Kanban doesn't work by just doing that. Kanban actually goes an extra mile to visualize what it is they are doing, and then help you to also limit the work that is in progress. And I'll explain how or why that happens. Kanban helps the team to focus on reducing the time it takes to complete a project from start to finish. And then they do this by using a Kanban board and continuously improving their workflow. So if we can all visually see where we are, what we're doing, and what the stage of that task is, where we gather, we can easily say, this is how long we think it's going to take us to do this. And then this is what we need to do to move this task from this place to this place, next place, right? So it's just that visual representation that really fulfills or does the trick for Kanban. Hold on. I want to show what the board looks like. All right. So this is what the average Kanban board looks like. And you'd have seen this somewhere, somehow, maybe even in some product demos like Trello or Jira boards, right? Or any form of boards, project management board. And it's very simple. It is, it says requested, but it's very simple as to do, in progress, done, period. To do is what we expect to do. In progress is what we're doing now. Done is what we're done with. Your to-do is a long list of all the things that you have been asked to do, and that's everything that's in your requirements, right? The in progress are the limited number of work that you have to do, and that's what your work in progress means, right? If you have to do 10 things, even as personally, right? If you have to do 10 things, and you put all the 10 things on for a week, let me put it that way, and you put all the 10 things on your to-do list, fine. You could check them off, but the high chances are you check them off at random. And that's just you. Imagine you have other people sharing the same to-do list, right? Everybody's going to be picking something that they think is of their own interest at random, and that doesn't work. Doesn't work for anybody. There's no effective way to execute that, to-do list. because you could come the end of that week and nobody has moved anything to done because people just randomly pick things. Nobody prioritized. There was no prioritization. There was nothing. But on Kanban board, you have your backlog of things that you need to do, and then you have your work in progress limit, which is it's just me. It's Monday or it's Tuesday. I have 10 things on my board. I want to work. I want to do 2 things today. So if you have 10 things in a productive 1 week, it means that if you tackle 2 things every day, you would achieve by the end of Friday all your 10 to dos, right? That's expectation. So your work limit is 2 tasks every day, and that is what is your work in progress. So for every single day, what you find on your work in progress are the 2 new tasks that you have moved on because the other 2 from the previous day, you check them and they're now done. And then you have your columns. These are called columns. Like I said, these are the basic ones. Some people could have testing, could have QA, could have design, whatever it is, right? But it's usually requested, in progress, and done. It works by default. The cards are the things you move, right? These are like your actual to-dos that you actually move. And then if you use a sticky note and then you have 10 things, pick two things for each day. And then for day 1, sticky notes 1, day 2, sticky notes 2, right? Those are your cards, but represent them on the board, basically move them. Now a swim lane is your cards going through literally the entire process of requested, in progress, and done. And that's the journey for your cards. That sort of breaks down the anatomy of a Kanban board and how it helps teams to visualize where we are. So on a Wednesday, somebody comes up to the Kanban board for a software development team, and they basically see all the tasks that is in to do and sort of like the expected period when that task is meant to be delivered, expected period or estimated period. And then they can see 2 other things. One is the things that are yet to be done, and the other is the things that are done. Very easy, right? Very easy being that everybody just knows, so I've done this, we're doing this, we're going to do that later. Very easy, right? So Kanban board just really helps teams, manage expectation, manage workflow by using, this visual tool. That's how Kanban itself, basically operates. Now the next one, and then this one is a bit of the common one that a lot of teams claim to use, even though there's a bit of knowledge and subject matter expertise that comes with being effective with Scrum. I'm sure you might have heard of people that are called Scrum Masters, and those are people that are taking extra time to actually learn the principles or the methodology of Agile Scrum. Agile Scrum being the daddy and the child together as the name. Agile Scrum, and then they are now certified as Scrum Masters, and then they work within software teams to help the team navigate software development within the foundation or the guidance of a Scrum methodology, right? So that is what, that's what it is. And that it's a super lucrative job, by the way, sometimes even more lucrative than PMs, depending on the organization, the country, the size of the team and all of that, right? And the budget. Some Scrum Masters actually manage multiple teams. Easier for Scrum Masters to actually manage multiple teams than product managers to manage multiple products, because if you are managing a product with say 1 million users, scalability and all of that, you are going to be too deep into the product, right? And you probably cannot be focused on another product. But the Scrum Master is just guiding a team, to achieve its objective, and then they can do that for one team and another team, which is more or less one software A, B, C, D, E, F, right? So very lucrative job, by the way. I just wanted to hint on that. So you can actually just be a full-on Scrum Master and then be collecting goods, and money. I think I was watching an Instagram video asking people about their salaries, what they do. And then I found that the Scrum Master minus one guy who does, drop shipping, e-commerce, The Scrum Master was the one who earned the highest 140K per annum. And then there were data analysts and data scientists, there were PhD people there. So extra points there. So Scrum team commits to completing an increment of work that is shippable through intervals called sprints. And this means, unlike using the same concept of Agile, rather than just and then totally deviating from the norm of waterfall, rather than waiting to like the end before you have something that can be used. If you want to build, like I said, the example of the iOS, right? You want to build an iOS that can do what has Apple not done today? So I think Samsung brags of this camera that can zoom all the way to like the moon, right? We all know, I mean, if you use even the most expensive iPhone, you don't have that kind of zoom quality, you don't have that kind of camera quality. But I bet that somebody at Apple has seen it and like, oh, we'd like to do that too someday, right? But this is what we have now. This is what our tech, understanding our ecosystem, our software and everything. This is what we can ship out to the consumers now. Maybe next year, same product, camera, we improve on it, right? That is an increment on the existing work. And that is how a lot of products have metamorphosed over the years, or changed, or been developed over the years. Nearly every common or popular software that goes through increments or improvements, but rather than the yearly increments that you usually see, what would happen in the internal is for Samsung to have gotten the 100 times zoom that they have now. The software was probably only able to get, rather than say, oh, we will only ship this when we get to 100, and that's when we have the products. No, somebody said, and that's Scrum. The Scrum team says, let's build. You know what the things we need to do. They do all of that, and then they test it, and then they try to ship out something that can do 50x, and the next one can do 60x, and the next one can do 70x, and the next one can do 80x. Now, it probably takes them 6 months, 3 months to develop this, and then for every 2 weeks, or every 3 weeks, or every 4 weeks, which is the advised maximum for what you call the length of the sprint, they would increase a working camera that can beat the previous version of itself. And that way, if the 50x or the 60x or the 70x, they notice something, right, they can improve on that thing in the next version and probably move from 70x to 90x. So they skip 80x. Why? Because they learned from the version that they had, right? So that is how, really how Scrum teams or Scrum itself build products or build software in increments of potentially shippable. So potentially shippable means that somebody can actually use it. Might not be the full thing, may not work the way you want it to work, but it's actually usable, and you can actually get early feedback from that. The very first version of that software or that application is usually called the minimum viable application product. So MVP itself might be the most basic functionality for any application. And then in product management, you call them the critical path. So the critical part for a banking application is I log in, I can see my balance, and I send money to an intended person. That's all. I'm out. But on the app, for some banks today, like I said, you could do a whole lot more. But that's the critical part. That's the most basic thing. So if you want to build a banking app, you don't want to wait till 1 year before you can build all the 20 features. You probably just want to build that critical part, which is you log in, you can deposit, you can see your balance, send money to an intended party, and you're out, and you ship it. That means you can get users that can just do that, They give you feedback and say, I like it, it's fast, right? Can you add this? Can you change this? And that can either influence the thing that you've already planned to do, or give you better perspective on those things. And the goal for them is to create a learning loop. And you can see it there, that the goal for Scrum is to help you create a learning loop to quickly gather and integrate customer feedback into your product. So rather than waiting to the end of the development of the 100x or the product or development of the full banking application before they now tell you that transfer, that's a very basic one. Now, why don't you just make it easy that rather than me entering password, I can just enter PIN, right? Input my PIN. Like, oh yeah, that works, right? But you already waited 1 year before you even got that product to the customer and then get that feedback. So you can get the feedback from your month 2 and you can move on from it because you developed it by month 3. Now, Scrum team adopts specific roles and specific artifacts and old regular ceremonies to keep itself moving. So this is now the work of the Scrum Master, right? Where you have all of these titles and these artifacts and these ceremonies that you basically have a core understanding about, and then you can navigate the team using them to achieve your software goal. So this is Scrum in practice. Like I said, you go through very quickly planning, implementation, review, release quickly, and then you fail. And then I think it's also the principle of fail fast, fail forward. But you don't fail because you don't fail, even if the application or the version that you come up with is not working. It's good because now you failed very quickly, you can know what to improve on, and then you do it again. Now, the vacuum of that time between when you start your first iteration and when you end it is called a sprint, and you can have multiple sprints. And the length of the sprints can vary based on what you want to build, the size of the team, the organization structure, and all of that. But by Scrum principle, a lot of Scrum guides you, or Agile Scrum guidance is that or advise that the length of your sprint should be an average of 1 week to a maximum of 4 weeks, right? But I've seen extreme cases where the entire sprint is a 6-week sprint for peculiar reasons, right? So that is also fine. Not fine by because they're deviating, but fine by adapting. So that's a fixed length, it's the time box for your development or your sprint, and then you quickly start again, right? And then planning now is also very short. So you're not planning the entire software. You know all the things. I mean, product manager on your own end, you're already thinking about the end goal for a product. But if you start to build a product and start to get customer feedback, you start to see more things to add. So it's actually nearly impossible to say you're exhaustive on the requirements. So that's why a product or most products that you use today keep evolving because they are like living things. Humans are adapting and improving, and then the person is thinking about it, and you that are using it, you're also seeing different things that could be better, and then trying to add them. So your planning is also based on the sprint. You plan for every new sprint. This is what we want to achieve. This is how we want to achieve it. Speak to your stakeholders if you need to speak to them. Take it to the whole process of gather your requirements, do your implementation, develop tests, and deploy, right? All the way to deployment, right? And you maintain if you already also can do that as well. And they actually also maintain, especially for your application or a product that's already live. So a live product is you use today now we're on Zoom, or everybody averagely has Instagram, right? As much as Instagram team development team is still building stuff, there's still a team that is the work is to be maintaining the one that people already use on production environment, while some other people are just continuously build stuff within the sandbox or testing environment. So maintenance can be ongoing, even for an application that's still that for a software that has an active sprint, you can actually have maintenance for the things that are already built and deployed as well. Now, so these are the Scrum events. You have your sprint planning, like I said. You have your review session, which is the end of a sprint or the middle of a sprint. You could have your retrospective, which is usually the end of the sprint. The reason for the sprint planning is, it's sort of like a ceremony where everybody comes together. There's a product owner, there's a product manager, there's a development team, and there's usually a scrum master sometimes, and a product design team person as well. And then we all look at the list of the things that we need to build from the backlog, the product backlog, and break them down into how we want to build it, what we need to build it, how it would work, and what we would need to deploy or to execute or implement it as well. And that's what your planning is. And then there's a lot more that happens in there with estimation and all of those things. But that happens, when you do the whole full-on Scrum training or course, then it goes in depth into that. But these are just the key activities. The sprint review is also the same thing. Basically checking like a pulse check to see if the team is on track as well. While the retrospective is, we are done with the sprints, right? It could be the week sprint. It's a Monday, started on Monday, we're on Friday or Saturday if you meet after for organizations that work on Saturdays. Or if it's a 2 week at the end of the 2 weeks or the day before the end of the 2 weeks, or if it's a 1 month, you want to have frequent review sessions. So imagine a 1 month development time. You want to have frequent review session to see if you're still on track. And that's what sprints or Scrum allows you. You can do a review session every week, but it's not the end of the sprint because we have not met all the goal for that sprint. You have a retrospective at the end. And the goal of the retrospective is, there's a bunch of questions that people ask, or the Scrum Master, whoever is acting in the position of the Scrum Master would ask, which is, what are the things that helped us to achieve our goal? What are the things that hindered us to achieve our goal? The things that hindered us would be, what can we improve on? So there's a, what worked, what could be better, and what should we maintain? And everybody sort of gives like a perspective, personal. Every member of the team should actually speak, regardless of the size, but an average, development team is like about 10 people. The retrospective is usually an average of like in an hour, 30 minutes, 2 hours. So everybody can actually have the opportunity to speak. You could also manage it effectively with tools. There's a lot of tools you could use to manage retrospective session. There's Parable, which is very common, where everybody just drops their comments and then the thing auto rearranges based on some keywords, and then everybody can just see like popular comments, and then the team can by itself do an assessment of itself for self-improvement. And that is what retrospective does. Now, daily scrum or daily stand-up, which is an average of 5 to 10, 15 minutes to catch up every day at a given time, to just give a breakdown of what you worked on the previous day, what you're working on today, and if you have blockers. Pretty much that's it. Everybody goes through the same question. Sometimes some people don't ask the question. Everybody just says it. Start, and then the next developer, the next product member, development team members just takes his own turn to go through that structure of, this is what I worked on yesterday, this is what I'm working on today, and this is what I'm working on. These are the blockers I have, or I don't have any blocker. And that just helps with accountability, one, and also helps to solve problem or fix issues in real time. So you don't have to wait like when there's a team meeting before you can actually solve meeting. You can actually solve issues right there. One trick is not to make it too long so that people don't get tired and hate coming for the meetings. You want to keep it short as possible. And then if there are blockers or issues that need to be addressed, you can end the meeting. That's actually a common trick. You end the stand-up meeting. Let the people that are uninvolved with that blocker go. And then the ones that are not there can either schedule another meeting or stay on to just address those issues. And then these ceremonies are usually, like I said, lightweight and run on a continuous basis. So that are the common events. These are the roles that I already mentioned, some of them. There's a product owner. Product owner can be anybody, can be a stakeholder, can be a CEO, can be you as a product manager, can be your clients. Anybody that basically tells you what to do and tells you which one is important, right? And explains to you how it should be, how it should work. That person is a product owner. So a product manager can be the one that is saying, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it. And then this is one that's priority. It could be the stakeholder, your CEO, that's telling you, I can see your backlog, but this is one that I need now, right? That person is acting as product owner. Now, in Scrum Master, like I said, I've explained that one a bit. And the development team is everybody with their different specialties. Front-end developer, back-end developer, quality assurance, DevOps, the product designer, SRE engineer, whatever it is, with different specialties, like I said, that makes up the development team. Anybody that is required to actually develop the software and ship it, or to have it ready to use software, they make up the product development team. A product owner does not need to sit within the development team, right? So they can only pop up at the end during the retrospective session or during the planning session. A Scrum Master is the one that's guiding the entire ceremony. So he is a part of the team, but he's not regarded as this development team. In fact, some people automate the role of the Scrum Master so they could actually take turns. If you have a development team that everybody's like an expert in Scrum, somebody will just keep taking on the turn of who the Scrum Master is. He's a servant leader. He works for everybody, but doesn't really work for anybody. And the next thing is, the key difference between Kanban and Scrum. Oh God, that is a very terrible typographical error. Apologies for that. That is not Scrum, it's Scrum. It's with an R. So Kanban, there's a lot of differences that you find online if you check it. But the very critical one is that Kanban helps you to visualize, and then Scrum just helps you to provide structure within a team, right? Kanban is great for teams that have like a lot of incoming requests. That way, if I have like a lot of influx from like a business team, there are some organizations that have like a high influx from business teams, telling them this is what the customer is saying, this is what this one customer is saying, this is what we should build, this is what that, blah, blah, blah. You can just keep adding them to like a list of things that should be built. Like after assessing them, these are the things we're going to build. But then our focus is always still on the what is in progress, right? And what we have done, but what is in progress. So that doesn't really, it helps you to manage your work in progress and then visually understand what you need to build. While Scrum in itself requires high quality of control over what is in scope, you can actually get a requirement in the middle of a sprint, right? There's a trick about how you can actually implement it, even though you never planned for it. And that is in something called weight of the task or user stories or story points for the task. But that's just a trick, right? And that's just a bit not basic stuff. But you can actually, within a month of one week sprint, get a feedback from a customer on week 2, and they are changing what you in week 1, you already thought in week 2 are going to be doing this, and then somebody comes and says something that is priority to a customer or to a user or to the users, in the middle of sprint 1, you would actually want to plan for it because they've not prioritized it. You don't have to, but as your judgment call for the product manager is, I see the priority in this, and I see that we need to do this now, right? Whether because of competition forces, market forces, you need to do this now. Like I said, either use a trick to substitute for that work if the current sprint has ample time to achieve it, or basically plan for it in the next sprint and then take it on. And there's no need to be sticking it to a Kanban board and be putting it to your to-do. It's already a to-do. And that's the thing about sprint. You can actually plan for sprints ahead as well. So you can plan 4 or 5 sprints ahead if you're a very effective Scrum team. And then you can already just substitute and plan for the work, and you know exactly where you're going to be doing that thing. It could be the second sprint, third sprint, fourth sprint, right? Because you plan for it, right? But Kanban is, let us go with the flow. Let's just move. This is priority now. Okay, we'll put it in work in progress. When we finish, we'll put it to done. Pick the next thing. So it's a bit more, freestyle model. All right. So in terms of tools, Agile methodology has a lot of tools that people use to manage, effectiveness, whether it's in a waterfall, whether using Scrum Kanban boards or Agile Scrum, whether using Agile Kanban boards or using Agile Scrum boards. There's just a lot of tools, but these are the ones that I think are common, and you might have seen them before. Even the logo for Trello already shows you like the cards, the columns, right? So you have the Jira, you have Trello, you have ClickUp, which is pretty new and very exhaustive. Currently use ClickUp and Jira a lot, and Trello. So you could actually find yourself using all of them or some of them, because depending on organization's decision and choice. You could even have your organization use Jira and they use Trello to manage your own internal team, and then still report things to the higher level. So there's a bit of learning curve for all of them because they're project management tools. So there's a lot. There might be some things you need to learn to be able to navigate the softwares individually. Kanbanize is also one of them. That's by default focused on and has a lot of benefits to the Kanban board. Trello by default is almost like a Kanban board by logo. ClickUp has boards in them. You can actually now use the boards to create your own Kanban board or your own Scrum boards, right? And then Jira is the same thing, right? So those are all the different tools. I don't think I can actually go through walking you through any one of them in terms of how to use them. That would be a different class, and that would be for like each one of them. We have to pick one, go through like a whole lot of hours of learning before you can actually be expert in one of them. But just know that in terms of your boards, this would be like a default template of how your boards will look like, but then there's just more features within them that helps you to then manage the team in terms of documentation, requirements, elicitation, acceptance criteria, user stories, and all of that. All of that goes into how you manage a Scrum team and how these tools help you to be able to achieve that easily. All right, so it's a 2-hour mark. Thank you. I don't know if you have any questions, so I could address them.
Thank you very much, Tobi. So guys, if you have questions, please, this is the time to ask. So Tobi can take them. You can also drop such questions in the chat. Oluyemi is on ground to, oh, I missed that. Okay, I guess she dropped off. Okay, she's here. All right, is here. Thank you. All right. So Aura is on ground to also help collate those questions. So if you have questions, please drop it in the group or you ask directly. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello. We can hear you.
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks for the presentation. I really enjoyed the class. Yeah, while you are talking about the Scrum Master, you mentioned that it's like a chief servant. And my question is this: is it possible for an organization to hire a product manager and also a Scrum Master to oversee all the activities of the product? Is it possible for a company to do the same thing, to have a product manager and a Scrum Master for the particular product?
100% yes.
Wow.
So rapidly it is based on one, the size of the organization, the size of the project in development, the budget, and then the organization's approach to work, which is everybody being responsible for different aspects of things, or handling different things. So yes, it is possible to. It is common in the US, in fact, or abroad. Let me not use US. It is common abroad that they actually split the roles for their development team. Even in Nigeria here as well, a bit common, but we have made a lot of product managers, Scrum Masters in Nigeria, so it's cheap labor. So, but some teams, InterSwitch, my experience in InterSwitch, we had program managers that acted as Scrum Masters. So I had nothing to do with managing the Scrum team, but I understood the principles, so I could always substitute as required. It wasn't my work.
If I may ask, actually, I'm just trying to switch into product management, so I don't know much about the industry.
That's fine.
So what will now be the work of a product manager in that organization when the Scrum Master is the one putting on the assignment, the meeting setup, and some other stuff like that, assigning the portfolio? What will be the job of product manager in that kind of setup?
Very good question. I think this is a challenge for Imole. A lot of, and the way I've seen Imole is, this program generally, not just Imole, I'm sorry. Product managers have been put into a bucket of your work is managing the development team in development. In Nigeria, actually, it's common. I'm always opposed against it, that people think that product managers are just Scrum Masters. And a lot of people actually think product management is just Scrum Master, which is why you're asking the question, and that's valid, where your work is to gather requirements and then manage the team when the team is in development and then deliver the product at the end. But that's not the work of the product manager only. The product manager's work, the Scrum Master work doesn't even start on the development start, by the way. I need to note that. So all the things about requirement gathering, analysis, and all of that has nothing to do with Scrum Master. It's fully the product manager's work. Now, the Scrum Master steps in when development kicks off, right? And God knows the product manager actually has nothing to do at that. But in some organizations, you actually not do anything but just support. Support being that you're answering questions and clarifying issues where required. Now, the project now shifts, and that's where product management work actually starts, interestingly. Where a lot of product managers not actually even get to stay to see some of their products go live, to now even start product management on that product. And product management of the product is beyond getting the product to the hand of the user. You want to get it to as many users as possible, and you want to also improve on the product and ensure that it scales. So he has to achieve the objective, he has to make money, and he has to keep the customer happy. And doing that, those things look very busy, but it's a lot of work, right? And that is where the product manager work comes in. And then there's a lot of things that you need to do for that to happen, which is engaging customers as often as possible, collecting data. Now, some companies can even give you data analysts that collect data, analyze data, and give you the data itself. But you as a product manager, you need to now make sense of the data. What does this mean? What decision am I taking out of this? What product strategy are we taking? Even before you even ship the product, you could even decide on the product strategy. Scrum Master has nothing to do with it. This is you as a product manager fully. Now, imagine you are a product manager that comes into a product that is not even in development. They're not building anything. There's no Scrum Master anywhere. Product exists is live. Say a Kuda bank, right? They say you are the new product manager for Kuda, but you're not in development. So what is your work? That is where the question becomes interesting. And that is where you will now they'll give you a set of KPIs. And the KPIs are product success KPIs, right? So the product success KPIs are, what are the key things that this product will need to achieve for us to say this product is a success? Very common ones are the number of users, number of daily active users, monthly active users, the revenue that we're making every year, every month. ARR is every year, every month is MRR. Churn rate, which is we have onboarded X number of users, but we only have X number of people using the product. So you need to get more people to use the product. Or we have X number of people, but they keep leaving. So you need to reduce the number of people that are leaving. Those things look just like wordsy or hearsay, but there's a lot of product thinking, product strategy, consumer understanding or customer understanding that needs to happen for you as a product manager to be able to call the shots and make a decision and say, this is what we need to do to be able to achieve this, right? And that is where product management becomes interesting, not the development side of it, where the Scrum Masters, supports.
Thank you very much. But the example you cite about the Kuda Bank, the job of the product manager in that the example you mentioned is very close to the job of CRM, customer relation manager.
Why did you say that?
Because the customer relation manager has to do with the effect of the product. Let me use that word. How the customer relates with the product and the relationship between the customer and the company itself.
Correct.
Are we making more profits or we are losing customer? Are we going to retain more customer? Are we going to make them comfortable with the products with our production? So it's very close to what you mentioned for the product manager and that of Kuda perspective.
Can I ask what you currently do? Do you work in a bank?
No, at all. I'm still looking for a job.
Oh, okay. So the reason I asked the bank question was you're not wrong in the sense of the title and the responsibility. So it looks like two different types of the same responsibility, but that's just one thing. Customer, right? But you can have a customer, you can keep a customer happy and you're not making revenue. You need to note that. Customer relationship manager in some context might be maintaining the customers you already have. Customer relationship manager for some context might be getting more customers. And some customer relationship manager might be doing both, getting more customers and keeping the ones that they have. Their KPI might be focused on just the number of customers that they bring in and the ones that they keep. It might not have anything to do with how much they make, right? Another thing might be, how do we then even scale the service? Now, customer relationship manager in the case for a bank is, we're not offering anything beyond just this mobile app, but I bet you that Kuda has not just got, Kuda as you think is a good app or a great app or product, has not gotten to where they can get to, because you also see banks like Monzo and N26 in the US or in Europe, and you see where they are, you can see that, oh, there's a long journey for what a neobank can also become, right? The CSM is going to be having product thinking of how or what can I add to this product to help us scale or help us get to this number of users or help us get to this market. A CSM is not going to be thinking, if we want to expand to Europe or to South Africa, what do we need to do to expand to that point? CSM's job is focused on the consumer, that the customers they already have or the ones that they need to bring in, not on the product itself. But the product manager's job is taking on the job of the CSM, taking on the job of market expansion leader, taking on the job of a business strategist, taking on the job of a marketing manager sometimes, right? And then just doing, it's a kind of title where you just do a lot of things, in buckets of different other people's responsibility, but all around or centered around the product they are working on. So that way I said, it's not a wrong suggestion. It's just not, that is not all of it, even for Kuda Bank example.
Very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tobi and Aziz. Does anyone else have questions? Going once, going twice, going. All right. I'm conscious of time. We've actually gone over time. Tobi, thank you very, very much for this class. It's really, really eye-opening, and thank you so much for doing so much justice to the topic. It's a very, very interesting topic, especially trying to understand the things that a product manager goes through on a day-to-day. Also, the crucial, that thin line between a product manager and an agile delivery manager, which is always like, even within product orgs. I remember in one of my teams, all of my teams essentially, I work within three teams, and we just onboarded like new agile delivery managers. And one of the first questions when I had one-on-one with all of them, one of the first questions, not just me, my researcher, and one of the and my QA person. And then the key questions that everybody asks at first meeting with all of those persons were like, sorry, what exactly do you do as an agile delivery manager? Because they are like those set of people that you just know they exist in the team, and they are making.
I did not even know they existed until I joined into Switch. It was interesting that I learned that there was there was an art sync, engineer.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting thing, and thank you so much for doing so much justice to it. And we hope that next time we call on you, you will be able to sort of to help mentors and teach us some from your wealth of knowledge. So thank you very much. I will definitely be reaching out to you after this. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And yeah. So everyone, if we have any questions whatsoever, please pass it. You can still pass it to drop it in a group. I can make sure that it gets to Tobi. Tomisin is also very much on ground to help us with all of the answers that we may have, questions that we may have as well. So thank you very much, everyone. And Ore and Yanu, thank you, and everyone that has joined the call today. Chima B, I think Oluwadam Lola joined later, Akinlade, Kimbode, Jessica, Ni, thank you, everyone. Ziz, thank you, and please let's have a lovely week ahead.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you all.
Sorry, Tomisin, can you please stay on the call so that we can talk a little? Thank you.